Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chair, you says that the post-launch meeting are relaxing, unlike the morning, but there is a danger that it become too relaxing, and the danger of falling asleep for some of the audience here.
Not with you on the dais. Don't worry.
It's a great honor for me to come back again to Delhi. I would like to share with you two examples of the strengthening the relationship between Afghanistan and India. Yesterday, when I was comparing the price of Afghani currency with the dollars, now it seems that the Afghan currency is equivalent to Indian rupees. So at least in one area, we have reached a degree of parity that there's 1,000 Indian rupees is equal to one.
We have no 1,000 Indian rupees.
No. In case of Afghanistan, that the exchange of rate, Indian rupees and Afghan rupees are the same. No, so that the parity.
Congratulations.
Yes,
okay, go ahead.
And the second is that a few years ago, there was a ministerial meeting, and I was accompanying Dr. Spanta, and there was a dinner at the Hyderabad house, and there was Indian delegation and Afghan delegation. On the Indian delegation, nearly half of them were vegetarian, and on Afghan delegation, there was no one a vegetarian. So it was a matter of a great embarrassment for us, the Afghan delegation, that there is no one among the Afghan delegation who is more civilized, more human in being vegetarian. Now the good news is that I have become vegetarian. And that is the impact of civilizing India on me, that it makes me more human by becoming vegetarian. Of course, no offense to other group of people that I used to be like you here. My presentation, it has 4 parts, and I will try to present it in 15 minutes, the time that I was allocated. The first is sharing my perspective on this conceptual confusion about the cause and root of the radicalization. And the second and third part of my discussing will be focusing on Afghanistan in a broader regional context. And the last part, we will, as you instruct us, to discuss on the way forward here. I think when I listen to different perspective on radicalization, what is the causes of radicalization, it reminds me of discussing among social science that when political scientists claim that the political science is the mother of the subject, the philosopher says, no, we are the mother of the subject, and yes. Mathematics, physics, they say, no, we are the mother of all sciences. And when it comes to radicalization, again, we will see each perspective claim to have the supremacy on that. The psychologist says that we have the accurate prescription, the sociologists, historian, political scientists, orientalists, intelligence community, each constituency claim a supremacy approach to understanding the causes of radicalization. In my understanding of radicalization, I think the radicalizations is a three-dimensional issues. The first, it is a crisis of modernity. Modernity, and that is Islamism as an ideology, it is a modern phenomenon. Modern phenomenon, therefore, like any other modern concept, we have to contextualize in the discussing about modernity. Modernity and Islamism, political Islam, I see as partly as a modern phenomenon. Therefore, it is something that was created within the Western civilization. Yes. The second aspect of radicalization, it is this clash of civilization. I mean, the Islamic world and the Western world, they have centuries of animosity, which started by the Crusade. And I live in the West, I studied in the West, and I work and live in an Islamic world, and I can see in both constituency that memory of East versus West here. And I have seen that Islamophobic sentiments among many Westerners, and I have seen many anti-Western sentiments among many Muslims, including secular Muslims. So there is a centuries-old battle, rivalry, competition, animosity between Islam and in the West, and that radicalization is a latest manifestation of that clash of civilization. Yes. The third dimension of the radicalization, it is the crisis of the Islamic world. As Ambassador rightly says, there's a state of denial in the Islamic world. There is a crisis of leadership in the Islamic world. There is an intellectual stagnation of the Islamic civilization. There is economic crisis. There is a sectarian crisis in the Islamic world. And we can see this violence as a reflection, as a manifestation of the crisis of the Islamic world. Therefore, the complexity of the issue of the radicalization is that because it is at the same time, it is a modern phenomenon, at the same time it is a historical phenomenon, at the same time it is a part of internal crisis of the Islamic world here. Therefore, we should be careful not to reduce this phenomenon either to a sectarian issue, as Dr. Zahrani says that it's not a Shia-Sunni issue. But at the same time, we have to accept that there is an element of sectarianism, but also there is an element of Islam-West rivalry and also a crisis of modernity here. Coming to Afghanistan and our challenge of radicalization, again, because of the time factor, I would like to focus on this nexus of politicization or instrumentalization of Islam in a part of the world for political and geopolitical objective. And it started with our mutual friend, British, English, that when Amanullah Khan start attempts for the restoring Afghanistan independence, the British used mullah as an instrument to delegitimize Amanullah Khan. And they spread propaganda that Amanullah Khan is trying to eradicate Islam from Afghanistan. So that in case of Afghanistan, the root of political Islam was really facilitated by the British in an attempt to defeat Amanullah Khan effort here. And in case of the subcontinent, again, you are well known that how British use Muslim in a way to weaken Indian independence struggle. After the partition of India, once again, our brotherly good neighbors, Pakistan, use Islam religion against the first war with India. They used the tribal in the name of Islam here. Again, during the Cold War, we know about this concept of the Green Belt, which was used by the West as a means to weaken socialism here. Socialism, and we know the history of the support that Mujahideen receive from the West. I was in the Chinese. I was in a Chinese-related function the other day, and I was told that the Americans they facilitate some Mujahideens to go to China to receive training in China. Yes, therefore, political Islam has been a tool of the West against nationalist movement in the Third World and against the communists. Also, the history of the Hamas. There are some literature of how Mossad helped support Hamas here. So there is always history of political Islam, which is that it is a creation of the Westerns, a political agenda against communism, against nationalistic movement here. And that also an important factor. Unfortunately, the Western literature, they do not want to provide sufficient space about the nexus of West and political Islam here. The latest challenge that we have in Afghanistan, we know about the Pakistani sponsored terrorism against us and against you, and also the history of the Taliban. I call the return of Saudi to Afghanistan. And we saw 2 days ago that there was a suicide attack against a mosque in Kabul, and it is just a sign of return of Saudi to Afghanistan. As we know, there is a Saudi. Again, we know that Saudi is a creation of the British against British, and Wahhabism is a creation of the British against is the Ottoman Empire here. Again, when I said at the beginning that there is this nexus of political Islam and the West, the creation of the Saudi Arabia and the Wahhabism, again, was something that the British were instrumental here. Now, the Saudi they have returned to Afghanistan in recent months, and unfortunately, there are some signs that they want to bring this sectarian conflict into Afghanistan here, and therefore, and unfortunately, we will see in coming months more issue of the sectarian issue in Afghanistan. But again, I want to emphasize the geopolitical aspect of the Saudi. And unfortunately, we didn't take Saudi seriously. I mean the international community as a whole. I was reading some literature that the Saudi are overspending nearly $7 billion to spread their Wahhabist version of Islam. And $7 billion were mainly spent in the religious mosque here. So now, during the last 4 or 5 decades, Saudi, they have built a very sophisticated network of institutions that now they are paying dividend for Saudi investment here. So I think the Saudi money and Saudi ideology is becoming a serious issue for us in Afghanistan here. As the way forward, as Mr. Chair asking me to be conscious of the time, I think this question of the radicalization has been focused too much within a religious context. That means that those Muslims are being forced to choose only their Islamic identity. Therefore, what I want to say is that there is also a space for a post-Islamic constituency in the Islamic world. Therefore, we can identify Muslims who are not necessarily want to identify themselves in the religious text of that. There can be people who happen to be Muslim, and I do not want to use the word of secular Muslim because, again, secular is very Western connotation and it has its own history. But therefore, we should not assume that all 1.2 billion people are Muslim per se. Yes. Therefore, what I want to say is in this, as a kind of a conceptual exercise, to recognize the post-Islamic or non-Islamic constituency among Muslims. Yeah, this is important, yes. The second is that there is a cosmopolitan and pluralistic Islam. Pluralistic Islam, and which I believe that there is manifested in Khorasani Islam, which is India is part of that Islam here. And Khorasani Islam has 3 pillars: India, Afghanistan, and Iran here. And if we can translate it into a geostrategic concept, there is a question of this alliance of Afghanistan, India, and Iran's as a way to revive Khorasani Islam, which was a cosmopolitan, which was an inclusive, which was whatever you want to say that, but again, it is an Islam that it is part of ours and we can recognize. And the third is the centrality of the state. A state system needs to be respected in our part of the world. In military intervention in the Middle East, they destroyed the state system. As Dr. Zahrani emphasized, that political order has to be seen in the centrality of a state. And therefore, we have to respect the sovereignty of all state actors. I'm very sad to hear that my colleague from UNAMA, the way he spoke about the Afghan government, I was very surprised that because I don't know if your individual capacity or UN capacity here is that. I know he's a good friend of Afghanistan, but I hope, but unfortunately in Afghanistan, that is the reality, that is that we have seen the Afghanization of the weakness. All problems have been put on the shoulder of Afghans, particularly the Afghan government here. Yes, there is corruption, there is a lot of issue in Afghan, but once again, it is important that we respect the sovereignty of a state. Now, we might not like the nature of that state. It is a democratic, it is despotic, but it is important the centrality of the state has to be respected by all stakeholders. And when you respect the sovereignty of a state, then you have to ask accountability of the state here. Again, unfortunately, you says that there are 2,002 people from associated with IS. Their weapons are supplied by neighboring country. But you don't mention the name of this country, but you freely criticize the Afghan government. Again, you are not alone. Unfortunately, it is a pattern of the Westerners, including some international organization, is that they have this double standard approach to Afghanistan. Here's that. They freely criticize the Afghan government as if Afghan government is an actor. But when it comes to Pakistan, naming Pakistan as, they become diplomat. And so if they, what I want to ask is a consistency. If you want to be diplomat, then please be diplomat with all states. In the UN system, all states are equal. But if you want to a political analysis, then you name it. You name it corruption of the Afghan government, but also you name the support that Pakistan provides to terrorism, supports that some other nation provide for terrorists. Therefore, what I want to say is that the centrality of the state system in our part of the world has to be strengthened by all actors. And that includes the state of Syria, the state of Yemen. And that means that in this system, there is no space for hegemonic players. Now, the problem that we have now, Saudi Arabia is a hegemon. And is promoting a kind of an Arab version of imperialism. Really, in the form of Islam, they promote Islam, but the reality of the Saudi Arabia is promoting Arab imperialism. Or Turkey, for example. Some people in Turkey speaking of reviving of a new Ottoman Empire. I said some people. But again, we do not need hegemony in our part of the world here. So we need respectable, sovereign, independent states. And then we can work. And the last, which again, India can be a good model for us, is the democratic process in the Islamic world. And thank you very much for your attention.